Well, good morning to you and welcome back. You're watching Morning Express. Just in case you're joining us, we're taking a look at the dailies. We had focused on the United States of America, even as they have just inaugurated the 46th president of the United States. That is Joe Biden. We'll definitely keep you updated even as we note his first day in office going forward. But we definitely have to look at local issues that are rising from the country, some of them which are highlighted in the dailies. Just make sure you grab yourself a copy. We'll start with the latest from the political angle, which has been highlighted partly on the front page of the Standard. Raila's party zooms off to 2022 political battle. Now, ODM has shifted gears, prioritizing the 2022 campaign, even as it insists on structured and formal talks with allies to protect its own personal interest. It seems it is regaining ground in the party, and so is that particular shift of focus. I'd like to begin on that particular note. Gloria, what say you about the sudden realization by the ODM party that, yes, we might have lost ground and it's time to kickstart ahead of 2022 election?
I actually think it's the sudden realization by Raila Odinga that he actually needs to change tact. Because when you say ODM party, we know very well that it's strongly led by Raila Odinga, and what he says is what happens or is what takes the day. When I was watching the press conference that they had at Chungwa House, and you could see the expressions from their SG, Sifuna, and from the ODM members that actually came out to say that they're now focusing on strengthening the party. In fact, the message was, to me, I took it like, you know what, there has been a lot of complaints that this party is being led by one person, the processes within the party are not being, followed. And so it was almost as if to come and reassure the members that, okay, we have had your concerns, you want us to follow the processes that we have within the party, whether it comes to, you saw what happened in the by-elections in Msambweni. A lot of fault was actually blamed on certain individuals within the party. There was a lot of wrangle saying that they lost Msambweni because they were not organized and they did not follow the party processes. So I think there's a realization that going forward with all the by-elections that are actually coming up in March, that if they do not run ODM as a party, as opposed to how it has been run as a family affair, that there is a great risk that coming 2022, when they are pushing for their presidential bid, they are definitely going to lose. So I'm glad and I'm really happy to see the youth pushing that agenda on ODM. I'm happy. I know I say a lot of things about Edwin Sifuna, but I'm happy to see that, he's been headstrong in terms of really, guys, we need to have business continuity past Raila Odinga as an individual, past Raila Odinga as the family, and let's run this party the way it's supposed to go. But I will tell you this. There's also, since Kangata's letter, where he came out and expressed to the president that really BBI is a fail in Central and it's not going to go through, a lot has happened. A lot has happened in terms of even the Mount Kenya BBI drivers who sort of got a scare. They sort of understood that above and beyond the party politics, above and beyond the handshake, they are elected leaders and they were elected by the people and those people are watching them. So come next election, they will be punished for not listening to them. So you've seen a lot of them come out and actually say, now Anwar Guru is even talking about we need consensus. Building consensus in the Building Bridges initiative is a statement that we personally brought in. We are seen as the sympathizers of the Hustler Nation. We started by saying this process actually should be taken in a way that it's uniting the people, so we should build consensus. So Mount Kenya is slowly shifting and saying that we don't really care much about that handshake. And for now, this is what we care about. And that is what ODM is responding to. They are realizing that, okay, that handshake was not going to deliver Mount Kenya. Right. They're realizing BBI is not delivering Mount Kenya. Nothing is delivering Mount Kenya to Raila Odinga's presidency. And so therefore, it's time to sort of, jump ship.
Now, Stella Gara, it's interesting because this move suggests that the party may be diverting its energy from the BBI, from the handshake, just as Gloria has mentioned, which is a pet project of Uhuru and Raila to focus on next year's elections. But even as you speak to this, the Nairobi governor's position has also elicited ODM's reaction, saying they are ready to go to the ballot, if that is the case.
Just on both questions that you have asked, I am on record here on KTN Morning Express as having said, one, on the 1st of this year, that the politics in this country is going to go on high pitch so fast, Kenyans will be reeling from the change that will happen. I indeed advised Kenyans to make a decision on who they are going to vote for and quickly vet them now before the confusion starts, because within a short while, nobody will be able to know the difference. The decision by ODM to go or rather to focus on presidential election campaigns and reduce, the kind of time they're spending on BBI is one of those signs. One of the things that I find extremely disappointing, Jesse, is the fact that we are still having those tribal conversations. We just do not depart from them. I mean, you would think a healing process in the country would actually bring us to a place where we understand that those tribes are not delivering anything to Kenyans. But we're still having those conversations. Unfortunately, nobody is behaving differently. The deputy president is organizing along tribes and trying to mobilize tribal groupings. ODM is here talking about the fact that BBI will not deliver central Kenya. And for me that is a really disturbing situation. I wish Kenyans would come to a place where they understand that these tribes, these tribal cocoons, these tribal packages have consistently been used to drive a very specific agenda in this country that is not to the benefit and the interest of the citizens of this country. There are certain things that we had agreed need to be addressed from the last election. Yeah. None of those things have been addressed, and from the conversation that is ongoing, they are actually taking the back seat. Okay. Moving forward, of course, this country is going to have a lot more conversations about the presidential elections and much less about the interests of Kenyans. Can Kenyans promise themselves that this year they shall prioritize their issues? As politics heightens, they shall heighten the conversation about the issues that affect them most, including livelihoods, including housing, and most of the things that have been affected during the COVID-19 situation. Okay. Speaking of Nairobi County.
As you conclude.
Speaking of Nairobi County, yes. I am again on record as having communicated that one of the things that Jubilee was trying to do is to avoid a by-election in Nairobi, but obviously all the actors desperately want a by-election. The reason why ODM is salivating completely on these Nairobi by-elections, or the possibility of a Nairobi by-election, is because they need to test and see if they still enjoy the same popularity they have had in Nairobi. Of course, by now, because of the wrangles in Jubilee, they enjoy an upper hand in Nairobi, and they would take with glee an option for a by-election in Nairobi. But let's wait and see what happens in court, and then maybe we will know in future if we're going to have a by-election in Nairobi or not. But if we do, it's going to be a fiery one.
Well, just going to note, there's also a new entrant in Nairobi. UDA might also be causing problems. On a night note, of course, but that is highlighted on page 9 of the Standard. Make sure you grab the copy for more information. Also, what Gloria mentioned earlier on about Waiguru's views on BBI, urging leaders, or rather Kenyans as well, to embrace all divergent views on that. But something that stands out is on page, is right on the next page, page 10 of the Standard, where Mudavadi fights off Uhuru's endorsement tag for the top seat, where the ANC leader is saying getting the sitting president's endorsement is a poison chalice that might spoil a candidate's chances. So it seems this all-important endorsement doesn't seem too important right now. Gloria, as you mentioned that, the Nation has also highlighted something to do with what Mudavadi mentioned. He says, Jubilee has failed you. He told Central Kenya that. What do you have to say?
I think Mudavadi this time around is trying to be independent. He's trying to be independent. So there's a lot of talk about how he's always threatening to run for president, and how he's, always coming down to negotiate for something. But that's not even. It's not really about Mudavadi. This is about how quick politics is changing, the dynamic nature of the current affairs we have in this country. And this is really about the political status of our president. You know, getting an endorsement of a sitting president, even if it doesn't mean much in terms of numbers, in terms of voters, it's actually a statement that a lot of people would die for, they'd be going out hoping to get that endorsement. So when you see the likes of Mudavadi actually quickly saying, you know, he wants to dissociate himself from the president, you've got to ask yourself then, all these initiatives or all these moves that we're seeing Uhuru Kenyatta trying to do just to salvage his political career, is it really worth it? Remember, this is also the same week that our president actually went to a vernacular station to apparently address the nation in one tribe. So you see, what you're seeing is a person, an individual who's really struggling to hold on to the remaining part of his political career. Remember, I've said this before, that the Building Bridges initiative, I think the only reason it might have looked enticing for our president is because it offered him that continuity in terms of actually being able to go back and vie for MP and then possibly, you know, being appointed into the expanded executive. You know, it gave a sort of window, but the moment that he realized that, you know, it's not possible to convince Mount Kenya, to convince his backyard that, you know, we're doing this for the good of you people, then he quickly, just as his character, he quickly, you know, got rid of it. And literally, when you're talking about ODM's change of tact, when you're talking about Mudavadi actually dissociating himself from that endorsement of the president, and Waiguru coming out to speak in the same terms as our Vice President William Ruto, and talking about let us push consensus for the Building Bridges initiative, Kangata writing letters and, you know, throwing them to the public so that you can to showcase that he's with the people, and the women rep for Nyeri also saying, you know, I'm not going to try and sell you this thing. When you look at the language that is being used, and when you look at the activities that are out here, it's simple, Jesse.
All right.
The Hustler Nation movement has caught ground. I had my colleague saying that you know, this tribalism card that is being pushed, that also the deputy president is actually holding tribal gatherings. I think that's unfair to say, because the Hustler Nation movement is actually pushing for shared economic prosperity, and if anything, he's actually been accused of creating a class war between the poor and the rich. So if anything, I would think the only person that is right now on that arena, the political arena, who is not pushing for tribal politics, who's not pushing for that divisiveness in terms of tribal lines, is actually our Deputy President William Ruto.
But I may ask, who's the... we know of tribal kingpins. Who's the Rift Valley kingpin, perceived? If he's not pursuing that tribal angle, why would you be perceived as...
You see, I can sit here and I'll be perceived as a sympathizer of Ruto. And yet, when I come here, I'm actually passionate about pushing for the youth agenda. Yeah. So how you perceive me and who I am are two different things. And that's why I'm saying it's almost as if there's this narrative that ODM, Kieleweke, and all these people who are fighting William Ruto are trying to use, that he's come out and he's saying, I'm pushing for the hustlers, I'm pushing for Mama Mboga and who and who. He's repeatedly, the narrative and the messaging that he has is the same, shared economic prosperity. But then there's this other conversation that people are trying to push and say, you know, we've had this kind of, this tribe leading us before. We've had the guys of Mount Kenya saying that, you know, we've got poison coming in. So for him, he has stood on the message of economic shared prosperity, but yet, because we have refused to change and think of our politics as a platform for development, we have stuck on looking at William Ruto as the Rift Valley tribal kingpin, instead of looking at him as the person who's actually pushing this country into a conversation about shared prosperity and economic development, as opposed to the tribal things that we are being brought about by Majimbo and rotational president presidency based on tribal. All those things are not being brought by William Ruto.
Okay,
they actually be suggested by ODM and Keleweke. So that is the conversation we should be having.
That's really interesting. We just had a discussion yesterday, and some of the panelists were also of the idea that, yes, he's pursuing the economic agenda, and they were of the idea, however, that it might be for political clout, because he hasn't exactly told us how he will pursue or will achieve this economic prosperity and all that. But let me cross over to Stella.
But Jesse, we have 18 months.
Okay.
We have 18 months to election. If people are going to start sharing their manifesto
it
now,
would be early,
I
yes.
mean, come on, yeah.
So you're agreeing it is definitely being used for
no, I'm
clout?
agreeing that myself as well. I'm waiting to see how that narrative will actually be translated into policy and governance.
All right, Stella, let's bring you into the conversation. Mudavadi mentioned this, or rather it's not him, it's been highlighted right here by Professor Anangwe rather. Kenyans have a distaste for political projects during succession. They prefer to choose a person who is not a surrogate of the outgoing regime. Even as you add voice to the movements or the political talk we're seeing right now, what do you make of the term surrogate, and who exactly might be termed as a surrogate in the current scenario?
Before I respond to that question, Jesse, I think I am owed a right to reply.
Quite so.
I'm the one who made the sentiment that all our leaders are making tribal arrangements for the elections. And I confidently said that the Deputy President is actually running a tribal agenda underneath the hustler narrative that is being driven. And one of the questions I'll ask is this. Are there hustlers, or I don't want to call them hustlers because I don't like the tag, but are there poor people who need attention in Luo, Nyanza, part of the country? Are there poor people who need attention in the Kamba parts of the country, in the former Eastern Province? Are there people who actually need that kind of attention, even here in Nairobi? Why invest so much money in Luyaland, in Kisiland? And then apart from doing that, the people who support him, the leaders he's working with, when they get into the microphone, instead of carrying the message as they have designed it, and they have it in their advocacy plan, they forget and start saying, sisi kama Waluya, sisi kama Wakisi. Do you understand? So for me, if it is about hustlers and that is it, then it should never come up which community you come from. As long as you're a hustler, you belong with them. So the Deputy President has done a good job of communicating that message, that he's speaking for the poorest people in this country and the people who need the most attention as far as that is concerned. But then his people are speaking a message, and definitely he's their handler, so he definitely approves of the message they're speaking. But having said that,
all right,
I think not just Mudavadi, but many politicians who are gunning for the presidency are going to declare that they do not want the president's endorsement. And the reason why this is going to happen, Jesse, is because most of these people have realized that there's a tag of corruption, there's a tag of wastage, there's a tag of embezzlement of resources, there's a huge tag of lack of care for Kenyans, especially as far as the COVID-preneurs are concerned, that is on the president's shoulders. And as long as you get his endorsement, you carry that. His deputy president himself has said he is disassociating himself from all the corruption that this government has carried out, which, of course, I refuse to accept. Because he is a part of this government, he definitely should be able to share responsibility with the president for what has happened. Now, Raila, you notice, and his team in ODM are now saying we are going to focus on the presidential election because we may not get the central vote. That, in effect, is saying they do not want the president's endorsement. Mudavadi has done a good job of ensuring that he acted, or at least demonstrated that he cares about Kenyans. He's talking about tax justice. He's talking about the governance of the country. He's tried to be the official opposition.
And it's been sustained.
And it's been sustained. And so now he realizes this endorsement that people were begging for him during his mother's burial could actually be a burden on his part. And he has quickly come to drop it, because if the deputy president or the president himself is saying he doesn't want the endorsement, then there's a problem. But for me, instead of focusing on these groups of people, one of the things I would actually ask Kenyans to do is to focus on the fact that people are running away from that problem. Kenya should carefully appropriate blame for the state we are in right now and check to see if we can get alternative leadership.
All right.
We don't have to be panguard. We don't have to go with the dynasty Kieleweke arrangement. We can start thinking very early and look for options, because as it is, I see us being driven into the same vehicle we have consistently been in, and then a time will come when we'll tell you we only have 2 horses, whoever those horses shall be, and then eventually we find ourselves in an election where we really do not have any options.
Okay, of course, more details on all the political rhetoric right there, especially touching on what Mudavadi has mentioned on page 10 of the Standard. Of course, you can also find more information in the Daily Nation, but it's also proper to note, quite briefly, Gloria, you mentioned about the embracing divergent views on the BBI, what Waiguru is mentioning, and how this might be symbolic to the actions or vile vitu iko kwa ground, how most people like to say that. As you add on to the BBI clamor, we've seen Raila Odinga actually make a move to meet MCAs and governors to popularize this in Mashinani. What do you make of this going forward? Is BBI getting a tough run for its money?
You know, there's a terminology I like to use. It's called lost cost fallacy. This is when you buy something that you thought, you know, you spend so much money buying an equipment, and then you realize very quickly that this equipment is useless. But then because something tells you, I spent so much money on buying this equipment, you keep trying to buy accessories to make this equipment efficient. So you buy, let's say, a wireless gadget, you buy something, and you still realize this equipment is absolutely, completely, like you lost your money. But something keeps telling you, now you've not lost the money for the equipment you bought and the accessories, so you keep pumping in more money.
So what's useless in this case?
My analogy is BBI is very useless at this moment. Okay. And what is happening is the Deputy President, William Ruto, from the get-go, he actually realized that, you know, if I come out and fight this thing immediately, people might not be able to understand why I'm fighting it. So instead of fighting it, let me raise a couple of concerns, which he did, and then let's hope that they work on them. Those concerns, of course, were too big a concern for them, you know, for them to be worked on, because the initiative was not necessarily about uniting Kenyans. And so therefore, what I see is Raila Odinga had an idea, a very brilliant idea of his campaign platform come 2022. After the handshake that he had with Uhuru Kenyatta, he realized that his brand doesn't resonate with the people. He realized that he's lost touch with the people on the ground. And so therefore, Building Bridges initiative was a way to bring him back to be in touch with the people. That's the reason why when we started the campaigns earlier of BBI, you could see that he was kind of gaining momentum, because he was going back to those people and telling them, if you're suffering issues of economic development, or if you're suffering issues of land injustices, this is what we are going to do, this is what we are... So people had started saying, okay, he's back, he's back. But then what happened is that support that he thought he would get from the president. Remember, the president only shook their hands, did the 14-member task force, and sort of okayed a budget that was then handed over to Raila Odinga. And then he realized that if he's not going to get the support beyond that from the president, then Mount Kenya is not going to, you know, get on board.
Okay.
So for me, when you talk about people now coming months later, actually, I think it's about 2 years maybe, since the word let's build consensus came out, since the Deputy President actually said, let's unite everyone, get everybody on the table and have a non-contested referendum. Yeah. When you now see the same people who are fighting that idea of consensus on having and not pushing a referendum and actually dealing with the issues without having to change the constitution, now they're coming on board to say the same thing. Okay. Then you need to understand that that is what the people on the ground, that is what they're saying.
Now, Gloria, many might take insult with that term useless, and I mean especially since perhaps many Kenyans haven't had the opportunity to go through the documents since the BBI team is still printing it out.
Isn't that why it's useless? Jesse, because if I'm selling you something that you can't touch, that you can't see, that you can't try, that you can't understand, isn't it? Then I'm selling you, it's air.
What if you're against it and you haven't read it?
So
already?
I think maybe a better word for me to use would be, it at the moment, one, it would be irrelevant.
Yes.
Two, it is not resonating with the people. 3, it is not, what would you call it? It's not a priority at this moment. So, and this is, it's an awakening fact, I think, just for Raila Odinga and his people, because everyone else actually was not interested in it. They were pushing for economic recovery post COVID-19. We were pushing for our education sector. You're seeing how we are struggling even with just distributing of masks we have in store. We were pushing, we have a lot of things that we are dealing with for someone to come and say it's time for a referendum. And the Nairobi, the twist with what has happened with the Nairobi situation with our governor being impeached and, you know, it, of course, has brought in a new dynamic, because if you're going to have a referendum and you're going to have a by-election, it's kind of, it's too much. And we're just 18 months into the next election. So, I mean, Kenyans might be foolish, but we are not foolish all the time.
So. And it has been mentioned by the critics, the timeliness and all that. We'll definitely continue monitoring how it all unfolds. But make sure you grab a copy of the Standard for more details on that. I just want to cross over to Education Matters highlighted on page 18. If I may, questions raised over masks for poor pupils. Now, it seems that protective gear ministry promised to deliver is yet to be distributed to needy learners almost 3 weeks after schools opened. Bearing in mind the history we've had, would you read malice? Would you read a bad move in this, Stella?
I think one of the things that we must acknowledge, Jesse, and again, I'm on record in the conversations in this studio, that it's very, very wrong how our Ministry of Education is handling everything to do with the return to schools. I mean, when you promise to provide an essential item such as masks to needy children in schools, the least you can do is to make them available when these children need them. While they're waiting, what are they using? Are they covering their faces with their sweaters? Are they, I mean, really, you're exposing these children to very dangerous situations. If COVID is as serious as it is, that we are not even allowing ourselves to have parliamentary gatherings without masks, why are we allowing our children to get into classrooms without masks? Why are we having such delays? Is it that someone in the ministry has messed up with the process of procurement or exchange of those goods that were donated by KCB and the other partners? What is happening? We already have stories that we have heard about the masks that were donated by the Chinese tycoon Jack Ma finding their way into Tanzania, and of course the government refuted. Are we going to hear similar stories about the masks that are supposed to be going to the schools? You know the nature and character of the people of a nation by how they treat their children. And for me, the CS of the Ministry of Education really needs to give a good explanation as to why these masks have not gotten to the schools, and why the children from the needy children are being subjected to such suffering. Indeed, these disparities have been demonstrated throughout the whole of last year when they were promoting online learning, and most of the needy students could not even access education through online learning. They were talking about the pupils learning through computers, when most needy children did not even have access to radios in their homes. I think we really, really need to be serious about how we handle our children, and generally, the government needs to be very serious about the rights of citizens of this country.
Gloria, as you add your voice into this, I mean, if I was a parent, I'd be worried reading this particular headline, but especially since parents were asked to buy masks as part of school uniform. But looking at the Standard, they mentioned the details in National Treasury and Planning post-COVID-19 Economic Recovery Strategy 2020 to 2022 reveals that 1 billion would be used in the next 2 years to supply masks to secondary schools. If the plan was to be implemented, an initial 800 to be spent in this financial year, the balance in the next. These are hefty sums of money.
You know, Jesse, yesterday I was in Kisii County and I went to 4 schools in Mombasa constituency to distribute masks, personally. And the reason I got a couple of phone calls from those teachers and whatever in those schools, and you know, they said, we are out here, we are all alone. And you can't say that we don't have the systems to disburse those masks, because we have all the way from, forget the governor, we have the senator, we have the MPs, you know, and then we have the MCAs who are actually down to the ward level. And the MCAs also work with the community leaders. That is how actually they are able to popularize themselves and know the issues that are within the small communities around their wards. So even if it's an issue of not having the proper systems, surely at the bare minimum, the government would say, okay, we might not have a proper system that is devolved, but then can we use our elected leaders? Because they would be happy to be the ones to actually access those masks from the Ministry of Health. They would be happy because, you know, the nature of politicians, they would be happy to go and say, it is I who has made sure that I brought these masks down, but that defeats the whole, purpose of this distribution. Because what we care about as parents is that our children are safe. So however way the ministry would choose to look at that situation, I think that really it is a failure on the Cabinet Secretary Magoha. I really truly believe, and I have said this so many times since the pandemic began, that we really need a Cabinet Secretary who understands what our children are facing. I'm not talking about the children here in Nairobi in the few corners that you have here in the schools, but when you're talking about a school, Nyabonge, down in Bobasi constituency in Kisii, which does not, even to get to the school is a problem. How do you get those masks there? Jesse, let me tell you what I think is happening. The usual cartels, the usual people, what we call the system, are ensuring that we talk about this till we get tired and we forget about it. And those masks that are sitting in KEMSA, those masks that were procured 3 times the cost, are actually going to be kept in, and then they're going to be in circulation commercially. They're actually going to be procured or somehow dispersed to the wrong people, and they're going to sell these things for profit. So this is the reason why, as much as we are trying to run away from the narrative of talking about the hustlers and talking about the people who do not have necessarily these basic needs and bringing them together on the table in a certain movement. This is the reason why a lot of Kenyans are very frustrated. They've been pushed to a corner to a point that they resonate with the Hustler Nation movement.
Okay, Gloria, point made. Thank you so much. As we conclude, I'd just like to beg 1 minute out of your comments. Shortly, we have to talk about the insecurity issue in the north. I mean, Baringo has been a sore issue in terms of insecurity, Kapedo to be exact. And just to note the deaths that occurred there just yesterday, what do you have to add into this particular issue? Let's start with you, Stella.
I think as a country, we have come a long way in addressing some of the internal conflicts we have as a people. But I think we rarely conclude the matters. Once an issue, you know, or rather once people become calm, we let things go and we assume that the conflict will not arise again. And then it comes to arise again. I honestly think we have so much going on right now. We cannot afford, you know, to have conflict situations when we are dealing with COVID, when we are dealing with a struggling economy, when we're dealing with all the other struggles that we have as a people. I indeed am interested in seeing a conversation that is going to bring final peace in some of the conflict-ridden areas, and eventually is going to bring, you know, some level of calm so that we can actually focus on the things that are really plaguing the country right now. But it's extremely unfortunate that people have to deal with insecurity and conflict while dealing with the challenges that we already have as a country as far as COVID is concerned.
Especially since it's not the first time, it keeps on recurring.
Correct.
Gloria, your input on this?
One of the reasons why Building Bridges initiative seemed like a good idea was because some of the things it was addressing was actually towards also security, towards understanding that we have certain regions that had conflict or still have conflict, and the conflict is actually coming from things such as land disputes, things such as, you know, clashes within the clans, and whatever other disputes. And what the conversation I liked about that particular point that the Building Bridges was trying to raise was that we were going to approach these issues in a manner that we will actually try to deal with the disease and not the symptoms. So for me, in terms of the security matters that we are starting to see, and you know, when it starts now, Jesse, 18 months into the election, it's just a sign that we really need to be aware, and our government really needs to understand that it's during these times that when they know that the political temperatures have risen, this is the time that you start having those recurring clashes, those recurring land disputes and deaths because of that kind of fighting. And I think even if we have dropped